Welcome back to Conversations with Edwin and Kelly. And I'm Edwin McCain. That's Kelly Bell. And we've had last couple of weeks we had some guests of mine. So this week, friend of Kelly's.
Yes. Please welcome Pastor Terri Cofiell. Pastor Terri is actually a neighbor of mine, and we met in a very weird way, but I'll let her tell you that story. But a little thing about her that I was so blown away from, she was one of the first 100 people arrested at the embassy in Virginia? In D.C.,
That was
right?
in D.C.
In D.C.,
Yeah.
when Nelson Mandela was actually arrested and jailed at the start of his 27 years in the penitentiary. And I actually got to meet Nelson Mandela, long time ago, obviously, and it was very, very moving for me. And everything just kind of came full circle. And then Terri and I got to talk, and then we kind of realized we're neighbors. And Terri, I'll let you have it from there.
Wait.
Well-
Terri, what number were you?
What number?
100, yeah.
I'm not sure, because that was 35 years ago in January this year.
You know, I mean, everybody wants to know where you went in the draft. So, I mean, you're in the first 30. Now we're talking, man. Seriously.
Well, we're going to post
No. It was the day it went over 100. That's why they thought we might end up in jail for a while, but we didn't. We were that day.
Start there. Well, let's hear this.
Okay. I was in seminary in Washington, D.C., next to American University as Wesley Theological Seminary. I was a student, and some of the students were going to go get arrested along with the faculty. Some of the members, the dean went, I think the president of the university went to be arrested to protest Nelson Mandela's imprisonment. And he had been in prison for 26 years at that point. I was not planning to be arrested. I was going to go stand on the other side of the street because the guy I was involved with at the time was going to be arrested, and I was going to go pray for him. And God, literally, I heard the voice of God. That was the first time I heard the voice of God call me a wimp. I don't know if there's a Hebrew root for the word wimp, but God said, when are you going to stand?
No, that's crazy.
Instead of going and taking a stand yourself, you're going to pray for the people who take a stand. Whoopee. But you had to have somebody to bail you out of jail, so you had to have somebody with $50, and I was poor as anything then. So I called my parents. My mother always answers the phone, but this time my father answered the phone. I said, I'm going to be arrested tomorrow, and he just said, stay there, I'm getting your mother. And he comes back, he says, she's in the bathtub. She said, don't move. And this was when long distance cost a whole lot of money, and I'm like, hurry up. She came and she said, what are you talking about? You're going to get arrested. I said, I'm going to get arrested. And she said, why are you getting arrested? I said, I'm going to go and protest Nelson Mandela's imprisonment and apartheid, which I think was just one of the greatest evils of all time.
Yeah.
So mother just has a fit. She said, why can't you raise money for starving Ethiopian children like any normal minister? I said,
yeah, but she was proud of you.
Not at the moment she wasn't, because she said, no one in our family's ever been arrested. So I tried to inject a little humor, and I said, oh, Mom, come on, look at our family. You know, somebody's been to jail. So
yeah.
Funny. Nice people don't get arrested. I said, Jesus was arrested, and this is the weirdest thing.
Bam! Oh, boom!
My mother says, I was not his mother either. Like, oh, Lord. So she hung up on me, told me to rot in jail. Later on, and it wasn't about what I was doing. It was about how I was doing it. So,
that's your mother calling.
That's right.
My mother knows I'm talking about it. No, that wasn't my mom actually, but she's come around on that. But Nelson Mandela had been in prison all those years, and I felt then I didn't get him out, but me and a couple of million other people sure did, because we brought attention to an evil. And I think that's the responsibility of people who are Christian or people of faith who believe in a loving God, who thinks that apartheid was just one of the great evils of all time. So I spent a day in jail, got out. Actually, and I didn't do it to get my liberal card stamped, which a lot of people think, oh, you're just this progressive who wants to have an arrest record. It was a little bit scary because they come at you, you're standing there. You had to be on the property, and you had to be singing, and you had to join arms. So, I'm standing there, and they don't.
What were y'all singing?
We Shall Overcome, baby. You know, well, you're going to sing when you're protesting. You're going to sing We Shall Overcome. And they don't take you in line. They come and they pull somebody out, so you have to get back together, which is a little bit more freaky than just taking you in order. I'm standing there going, we shall overcome, shaking like a leaf. And the officer who actually said, ma'am, I'm going to give you one more chance to stop singing and step off the property. I'm going, we shall overcome.
I'm sorry, but that feels so Monty Python to me. Start that singing.
It was weird. But the officer said, lady, I really admire what you're doing, but you are under arrest. Please turn around. And then they put you in a zip tie, handcuffs, and toss you in a paddy wagon and drive you to jail.
I hate to do it, lady, but you're going to jail.
Hey, but you know what? He meant what he said. You know, I admire what you're doing. And, you know, but do you feel like that moment informed the rest of your adult life?
I think it did because, you know, I do not consider what I did to be suffering in any stretch of the word. I spent one day in jail and had to walk a good ways because we didn't have enough money to get around.
Yeah, but Pastor Terri, you're cutting yourself short because you've been involved in civil rights and we're not just talking about for folks with sexual orientation, race, special education. I mean, you worked at Gallaudet, I believe, for a while. I know you did some signing.
I was a chaplain at Gallaudet and at St. Elizabeth's Hospital with Deaf.
You're selling yourself short. So I tell you what, start with the 60s and let's go 60s, 70s, 80s and build on through.
About 3.5 years ago, I wrote an article for the United Methodist newspaper for the Baltimore, Washington Annual Conference. That's where I'm a member. That includes all of Washington, D.C., most of the state of Maryland, and the Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia. I had just seen so much racism in the church, not just in society, but in the church. And an article called "The Diary of a Mad White Woman," and then it was crossed out the mad, and it was sad. Starting in the 60s, when I was a kid, I remember very clearly Dr. King's assassination, and immediately the attention went to the riots and the looting, just like it has with George Floyd's murder, to the reaction instead of the event itself. And that was the 60s, and then in the 70s, I was in my youth group, and we wanted to go to Hershey Park, which is what kids have done here for years and years and years. And the youth leader said, we can't go there because there are too many. And he said the big N word.
Oh, no.
And I was horrified.
And this is at church?
This was at church.
Oh.
And I went to my pastor because, you know, I don't remember if I said anything at the time or I was just so horrified. I went to the pastor and told him what he said. And he said, what do you expect me to do? And I said, something. So
yeah, fire him.
That was the 70s. In the 80s, I was in seminary and I was doing youth ministry. And we had this event for teenagers on a college campus. And a group came and they did a puppet show. And I think they were trying to be inclusive because it was Jesus loves little children, all the children in the world, red and yellow, black and white. They're precious in his sight. Well, they say red, and this blood red puppet comes out with war paint on and a tomahawk and starts smacking everybody around. And then yellow is this fluorescent puppet with slant lines for eyes, and she's bowing, and she's got a little fan, and I'm sitting there going, oh, crap. And then black, and I'm thinking, because half the kids there are black.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my
The kids thought it was hysterically funny. But this black puppet comes out with a boombox on his shoulder, and the only thing bigger than the boombox was his hair, which was just, you know, big fro. And he's doing this, you know, dance with chains around his neck and everything else. And then they go, white. And I'm thinking, what are they going to do for white? Well, it's this little boy in a Cub Scout uniform waving an American flag. I was like, no. So, you know, we had the staff meeting that night, and I said, anybody have a little, and there were a lot of especially the pastors who were part of this group who had some trouble with that. And I said, don't you think we're perpetuating some stereotypes? Do we need to talk to them about what they've done in terms of trying to promote inclusiveness? But this is their idea of, you know, we had everybody there, but everybody had their own stereotype. And a woman said to me, you know, little white boys need Jesus too. Thinking, oh, yeah. Then she said, "You don't like white people, do you?" So that's
No,
the answer you get.
not when they act like that. No.
Nope. So, that brings us up to the 90s. And it just, every decade, I could name at least 10 atrocious things. Down to the last one was the church that I was serving at the time. And I mean, you got to love the people you serve. You have to, because you got to do that. You got to love them, or you're never going to be able to deal with. You don't have to like everything people do, but you got to love them. And I preached about racism. It was after the church shooting in South Carolina. And a man came up to me after it was over, and it's something I truly do love. And he said, "Why don't you go apply for a job with the NAACP, because I hear they're hiring whites who are pretending to be black." And it just never stops. It never stops that people, mostly it's not.
I mean, I'm just trying to understand how somebody thinks they can roll up on you after you've been asking for understanding and empathy and kindness, and then be that ugly. That's amazing to me.
That's the other side of privilege. That word that it's turned into a hip word 2 weeks ago, but right about now it's starting to turn into an ugly word for a lot.
Well,
of
but hold on. But this is my Pastor Terri, my estimation is that kind of brazenness is almost inverse. It's an inverse relation to fear. There's some kind of fear that's inside them that gets reversed into hatred. It's the only explanation that's just terrified that if I'm not superior, then my identity is gone somehow.
I've tried to figure this out for so long, because since I was a little child, I have never understood. And I wasn't raised in the most liberal of environments either. I don't want anybody to think, somebody said once, well, it's no wonder she's like that. Her parents were hippies. My parents were not hippies.
Right.
He stretched the imagination. And we have often disagreed on politics and social matters, more along the lines of it's not as bad as you say it is. It's just not as, I think it's denial, it's guilt.
Sure.
And I think some of that guilt comes from a misunderstanding. I wish we could get sort of a new lexicon of talking about race, because people hear privilege and they immediately say, I grew up dirty, I don't have any privilege.
Shut down.
Yeah, they don't, or whiteness. I've said to somebody, whiteness has nothing to do with the color of your skin. And they're like, what do you mean it doesn't? But I think it's explaining to people. And what I try to do is not accuse, but invite, because
right.
colleagues won't say anything in a sermon. I spoke to a group of clergy last week. I was invited to say, how do you talk about this in front of people? Talk about it, because it's sin.
Yeah, just talk.
And they said, but, people don't want to hear it. You're going to lose your job. And they're really afraid of that. A lot of clergy are afraid of losing their jobs if they confront their congregations. We don't talk about sin because we don't want to talk about things that we don't like to do.
And that's powerful, because I mean, and that's kind of why Edwin, I wanted to have Pastor Terri on the show, because some of the things she was talking about in regard to conversations that she's having today, and some of the coalitions and some of the other boards that she's involved in that involve clergy from either other religions and other areas that they all get together, and some of the things that she's heard and heard other people say and stuff, how alarming it could be. So Pastor Terri, take us, I didn't mean to cut you off, but take us off through, get us through the 90s and up to 2000 and tell us what you're doing now.
Well, just a few years ago, when I was serving in the Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia, I was out there for 23 years, even though I'm a native Baltimorean and grew up in Baltimore County, and I'm actually serving the church where I was baptized in 19 long time ago. Yeah.
Right, last Tuesday, got it.
Last Tuesday in 1958. Wow, that's when I was here. So I just got tired of hearing excuses being made, and I just threw an invitation out, and I said, I will fix lunch, and I'm a really good cook. I will fix lunch for any clergy who's willing to come out and talk about racism. And that's a haul from Baltimore or Washington or Southern Maryland, but about, I think, 5 or 6 people came out. And that was the beginning. And we started moving around because I said, until we get over our own stuff, unless we're in each other's pulpits, unless we're in each other's churches, unless we're in each other's homes, this is not going to change. And I kept it up. And then I did not realize I started that just a few months before my husband died. He had been sick for a long time, but we didn't think it was that imminent. The knee replacement surgery. And then, I've moved. So I've sort of let that go, but I want to start that up again because we've got to change things, not just wring our hands and say, oh, nothing can change. I refuse to believe, and this is at the root of my faith. If you can believe that Jesus was raised from the dead, anything else is impossible, like getting rid of racism. And Nelson Mandela, people say, what are you going to go get arrested for? All it is just some grandstanding thing. And I don't think it was. I did not personally get him out of prison, but a whole lot of people bringing attention to that did. And that was
peaceful protest is extremely powerful.
It is. And my husband, when he asked me to marry him, he said, I want to get you an engagement ring and I won't wear a diamond. I will have nothing to do with diamonds because of the problems they've created in the world. And people say things like, is everything political to you? No, but everything is connected. And if you want to, if you don't pay attention to the connections, you miss the beauty of the diversity of humankind. So even when people say just hideous, racist, sexist, heteronormative things, I gotta love them, but I don't have to listen to that. And I don't. When people say things to me, what I say to them is not shame on you, you're wrong. I say you're better than that. You are better than that. And I don't want to hear things like that because that diminishes you in my view. One of my colleagues, a pastor's husband, put a picture of the Confederate flag on his Facebook page and said, I'm putting this historic flag here to offend the ignorant. And so I answered back and I said, consider me ignorant because I am offended. Because I don't stand by and let this happen anymore. And I think too many people have stood by for too long quietly thinking somebody else will do this, and it's not going to happen that way.
And Pastor, that happened recently, right?
Oh yeah, that was last week or this week. It wasn't more than 10 days ago.
If you look at the fractional nature historically of the Christian church, it's fragmented into so many variations of each branch of it kind of speaks to human nature, right? We tend to be confrontational, and we'll find some way that our way is different than your way, and we're going to go over here and handle snakes because that's the way we get it done, right? I mean, I see that all the time. So, and I got to be honest with you, call me whatever you want to. I grew up in the Episcopal church, and then the last church service I was in, I stood up and walked out of because it was a sermon about how
I'm going to go with heathen while you're looking for a name. I'm going to go with heathen.
You can. I'll accept that. But I stood up and walked out of a service that was saying that marriage is only between a man and a woman, and it was, and I was like, well, I'm out. I'll see you guys later. And the longer that I live, I'm going to be totally.
You're licensed to do marriages now, right?
I'm going to lay it all out there. I'm borderline agnostic at this moment in my life. I got to be honest with you. I work with people in recovery, and I know spirituality exists, and I see it all the time. And I know a bunch of atheist people that are really good people, and they're only good because they're good. And they have no.
I agree with you. I don't think you have to be a religious person, and religious is a scary word anyway. I don't think you have to be a person of faith,
right,
to be good. The woman who cut my hair for the last umpteen years is atheist.
I love this.
The woman who made the appointment for me held her fan over the phone. She said, "She's an atheist. Does that bother you?" I said, "She's going to screw up my hair because I'm a pastor," and she said, "No." He's more,
but that's the thing.
He's more Christian, to be honest, than a lot of Christians I know.
And that's
all day long, and
yeah. I mean,
still not live a life of love. I think the church has had so much to do with slavery because the Bible was written how many thousands of years ago?
All right, roll your sleeves up. Here she goes.
Slavery, yeah, I'm preaching now. Slavery was normative in the time of the Hebrew Bible. God says through that burning bush to Moses, I have seen my people suffering. I know they're suffering. And to know is like Adam knew Eve. It's an intensely intimate relationship. God experienced the suffering of the people and said, I have come down to deliver them. And then he looks at Moses and says, now this is what you're going to do. Because that's how God deals with God's people. You know, we're the ones who are supposed to do the bidding of God, which is always wholeness and healing. Well, the people then want to justify slavery in the 18th and 19th century. So they go and say, where can we find in the Bible? Oh, look, they got slaves all over the place. And Ham, you know, the son of Noah, they blame him for the subjugation of dark-skinned people because he was the father of Canaan. They don't look at the fact that Jews were going into the land of Canaan and taking their land away. And I'm saying Jews not as an anti-Semitic thing, but the reality of the people, chosen people of God. When they went into the promised land, it was already occupied. And that then becomes the rationale for the British and American slave trades. That makes no sense. New Testament, when, you know, Paul and Timothy write to Philemon and say, take this slave back, we're sending him back to you. At that time, they thought Christ was going to return in the next couple of weeks, and they didn't think any relationships needed to change. So, you know, go back to your man.
So they're just going to run out the clock.
Yeah, they were going to run out the clock. That's why they said, don't get married, don't do this, don't do that. But he sends him back and says to him, don't accept him back as your slave, accept him as your brother. So, but people want to take a couple of lines of scripture. Well, you know, you really, all of the Bible is taken out of context to some extent to apply it to the 21st century. But the common thread that I see from the Hebrew scriptures through the New Testament is the love of God for humankind created in God's image. So everybody I look at has God's image. Doesn't matter what color they are, doesn't matter what they've done right, doesn't matter what they've done wrong, what they believe, what they don't believe. They all bear the image of God. And I have an obligation to love them in their wholeness. And that also gives me, when Methodists and United Methodists later were ordained. And that's, I mean, our whole system was shameful. John Wesley was an Anglican priest, so he was a good Episcopalian before, you know, they came. And he wanted to reform the Anglican Church, and he reformed himself right out the door. By the time they got here, he said, and Methodist was a derogatory term, because they said, you stinking Methodist, you have a stinking Methodist method for everything you do. They line up and spit on him when they went into the chapel.
They're Christians, by the way.
They're Christians. Oh,
for those of you out there that don't know what she's talking about, these are both
right. We're getting the history.
Crusades. We got our shameful moments. But John Wesley, the last letter he wrote on his deathbed was to William Wilberforce, encouraging him to keep up his work in ending the British slave trade. And he said the only thing worse than the British slave trade was the American slave trade. That was what he did on his dying breath, was to write to him and say, keep doing this. No Methodist preacher in the colonies before the Constitution in the United States was formed as a nation, and even then, no Methodist pastor was allowed to own slaves. Well, that was well and good until we had a bishop whose wife owned slaves.
Oops.
Slaves. 1844, we split into Methodist Episcopal Church North and Methodist Episcopal Church South. Out of that came AME and AME Zion. They split off from those. And the Methodists got back together in 1939, but they were still segregated. It wasn't until 1968, when the Methodist Church in America merged with the Evangelical United Brethren in Christ, that we became the United Methodist Church. Because as of 1939, we came back together, but we had what was called the Central Conferences for Black Methodists and the annual conferences for white Methodists. So we were segregated. Even we get back together after the Civil War, long after the Civil War, but there's still such great disparity in even who serves what church and there's.
Well, I know which potluck supper I'm going to. I can just tell you that right now. It's not even a question.
It's from the lady across the street that stole my popcorn.
I did not steal his popcorn. They delivered it to the wrong house. But you know what, this
That's how we met, for those of you who don't know the story.
He is one of the best neighbors I've ever had. I put on Facebook on what would have been my husband's birthday that I had to go out and find some lemon meringue pie because that was my husband's favorite. He always had it for his birthday. And so about half an hour later, my phone rings, and it's Kelly, who tells me sometimes when packages are on my front porch and I don't hear him knock. And he said, there's a package on your front porch. I said, okay. And he said, this one's time sensitive. I was like, time sensitive? I go out, and what is it? It's lemon meringue pie, because he read this book. That's the kind of man he is. And, you know, I am so glad that I tried to steal his popcorn, which he says, because that got delivered to me by accident. He came over, knocked on my door, and said, I was expecting you to answer with butter all over your face.
And then what would you? And then what would you have done? You know what you would have done? You would have been like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and you'd turn around and gone. You would have gone home too. You would have said.
And I already felt bad, Edwin. Imagine what it felt like to. First of all, I saw the box.
Oh, did you have your collar on? Please tell me you had a collar on.
No, she didn't. She didn't.
Probably have my pajamas on, actually.
Right. But that's how we met each other. So the black guy with the long dreadlocks went across the street to pick up his yellow popcorn to meet the white pastor who was in her pajamas. This all went really, I mean, it was written perfect. You couldn't write it better.
But okay, so
to accuse her for stealing his popcorn.
Yeah, you know, that's a nice
That's
start,
what I said.
Kelly.
I promise you I didn't. He's like, yeah. I said, I work for Jesus. And he's like, oh my. I was a pastor.
Hey, I used to have
this, you know.
I bought this old Greyhound bus that had 2 million miles on it when we first started out. In the old gospel group, it had it before me. And they had in big letters written on the back, said, Jesus is my co-pilot. And man, I would see cop cars coming up behind us, man, with the lights on, getting ready to pull us over. They get close enough to read that, and then they just turn them off and pull off. I was like, yeah.
Hey, I got pulled over for speeding, which I have a problem with speed limits, and I know that's not right. So here's my confession. I got pulled over back in the days when I served 2 small churches between services with the robe, the cross around my neck. I'm already
Still gave you a ticket.
And he said, it's a posted speed zone, ma'am. I got to give you a ticket. And then he gave me this lecture about, you know, you would think somebody in your position would be more careful with the community. And I almost said to him, because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be so late now. I almost said, if you want to preach, follow me. I'll let you have a sermon. Write the daggone ticket. I got to go. I tried 3 times and I could not make my hand right on this ticket. So I'm giving you a warning. So
now you understand why this woman keeps me in stitches.
Man, so wait a second. So what you're telling me is you sicked momentary epilepsy on this man's hand with your magic power.
No, it was not. I did not wave my wand. If I had that wand, I'd do better things with it than that.
I take it back. I'm Methodist.
Hey, and my Jesus bobblehead got me. He was in my cup holder one day. That got me out of a ticket too. But
the Jesus bobblehead got you out, but the robes almost didn't. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Really?
Because
he went from agnostic to Methodist in a phone call.
Well, man, I'm afraid. She about shook the cop's pen out of his hand. I mean, come on.
It's amazing that people are scared of stuff like that, but they will hold on to some really bad ideas sitting in the pew. And
so let me ask you a question, Terri.
Sure.
What do you think the clergy are falling short of now? And I know this is a very dangerous question, so if you want to stay away from this, I'm cool with it.
You know what though? It's not they should not. No one should be afraid of questions, especially in positions of power in our communities now. And I would say respectfully that clergy carry a lot of power and a lot of weight, and people listen and follow their example. So I think everybody in positions of power should be transparent in this moment, especially.
Okay,
I mean, you do get beat up on a lot, and I'm not making excuses, but you know, if people don't like what you preach, they vote with their feet, they walk out the door, they withhold your paycheck, they do things like that. To me, that's a small price to pay, but I'm not wired like a lot of my colleagues, and actually that's the truth, because we had to do the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator for clergy. Believe it or not, 6% of pastors.
Wait, there's one of those?
Oh yeah, there's one for everybody.
And you couldn't like whammy jammy the test machine?
Nope. Well, when you go into the ministry, they ask you whose call is more like yours in Scripture, or whose call in Scripture reminds you of yourself. And when I started, I said Sarah, Abraham's wife, because she finds out she's pregnant when she's 110 and she laughs. And when God said, "I want you to be a minister," I was like, no, I don't think so. And when I said to other people, then they were like, no, oh Lord, no. I've heard all through my ministry, and I just celebrated the 35th anniversary of my ordination a couple weeks ago. 30 years of this, and people have said to me all the time, you're not a typical pastor. You're too outspoken. You're too this. You're too that. And the person who convinced me to answer my call, and one was an older man in the church after I answered the call, who I thought he had voted against me, and he came up to me and he said he had been called 50 years before, and people said, "Oh, you stutter. You're not smart enough. You'd never make it through college, much less seminary. You'd never get to do this, never get to do that." And he said, "Every day of my life for 50 years, I have regretted this." And he said, "Girl, don't you let anybody come between you and what God wants you to do for your life." One, and the other was a man. You have to pick two people to lay hands on you, on your head with the bishop when you're ordained. A gay pastor, and he was getting ready to surrender his orders, and he left the church. And he said to me, "You got to ask yourself, does God call you or somebody else's idea of who you're supposed to be?" So God called me, and I said in the article that Kelly was talking about that people said, "What would you do if you weren't a pastor?" I thought about it a long time, and I think I'd have been a lightning rod. Now I'm not Sarah anymore. I'm not laughing anymore. I'm Jeremiah, because I got called at a young age and thought, what the heck do I have to say? And God said, "I'll give you the words you need." Jeremiah got to a point when he was an old man, which is why paintings of him, they don't know what he looked like, but he's always bald because he's always tearing his hair out. I want to go into a room and just say, "How y'all doing? How's everybody? Let's all have a party. Let's have a nice time. Let's all let's just all keep it under wraps and be quiet about everything." And he said, "But I have a fire in my bones." And more I feel like Jeremiah. I cannot be quiet in the face of racism. Not be quiet in the face of oppression. I cannot be quiet about people being abused. Every single Black friend of mine, and I have a lot of Black friends who are...
I'm Evan. I'm Edwin.
You are too. Most of my pastor friends who are all professional folks, they're ordained, they have doctorates. One of them has been harassed by the police at some point. One of them, most recently, for feeding ducks with his son, and one of the neighbors called and said, "There's a suspicious man outside." By the police in front of his child, feeding ducks in his own neighborhood. I'm not going to be quiet about crap like that anymore. I'm not going to say it's okay. And if people say stuff like, to me, like it's not that bad, I'm going to say it is that bad. It is that bad.
It is that bad. Edwin did the same thing to me when he called the police. Now, granted, I was siphoning gas out of his truck in his driveway, but that was a little different. He knew who I was.
Yeah, and it had nothing to do with you being Black. You were just being hateful. But no, this is the part where I've had a lot of these conversations where it's like, no, really, like a lot of getting pulled over. You don't get pulled over. You don't have these interactions. These interactions happen all the time, and a lot of Black people don't tell you about it because they tell each other about it, and if they tell you about it, you don't believe it anyway, and they just quit telling you. And this is the thing. And now what's happening is I have friends that'll say, "Oh my God, I can't believe I heard that this happens, and I can't believe this happens." I was like, the fact that it's surprising to you is what white privilege is. Like, you've been privileged enough not to know these truths, and it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to listen, right? It's like my responsibility to listen. I've been listening to a bunch of stuff that I don't really agree with at all, but as an exercise of, if grace is available to everyone, then I can listen to whatever. Like, if you've got a point of view and you want to deliver it to me sanely and pleasantly, I'll listen to anything, right? And I think that's the challenge for us now, or at least for me it is being being still in a moment where I want to argue. Oh, I just want to argue, but I didn't. But I forced myself to just listen to what they're saying and their point of view, and just listen. Don't say anything when they're done. Just listen. And that's the challenge. It's hard. It's hard because everybody's trying.
It's absolutely hard.
And we were just talking, for example, a couple of days ago, I called Edwin and I said, I know that we're making a difference when black people no longer notice that the referee in the NFL game is black. Because now, white folks might see the football game and they see the head referee being black, and they go, oh yeah, black guy's referee. It rolls right off their back. But black folks look at it as a sense of pride. Even if you are a black surgeon, like, you're still looking at the fact that there's an NFL game on television and that the head referee, the guy in charge of the entire game, is of color and he looks like you, and you haven't had this point of reference, in most athletics, professional, big-time athletics throughout my generation at least. I noticed. And when you're talking about commercials that have mixed race couples in their commercials, and when we stop noticing that they're doing that on purpose, because no one is doing it by accident. They have way too many other groups that get together to talk about why this isn't a good idea. Someone had to talk somebody into doing that. And the fact that we still notice that and we still know that exists, when we stop caring about that kind of stuff, then we'll know we're doing something.
But Terry, you've got to have seen for as long as you've been engaged in this, you would agree that the trend line is improving.
Here it comes.
Something has happened with George Floyd that we've hit a tipping point in the nation. And I don't know if you saw NASCAR.
Oh yeah.
Today when they surrounded this car. That's huge. There are things that are happening. Aunt Jemima's picture's going to get off the bottle. Well,
and black folks have been talking about that for decades.
And I've had so many white people say to me, really, is that important? I said, that's an image of a slave. What do you think it says to somebody who's black? And when somebody says to me, I get a little riled up about the Confederate flag. We probably should not go there right now.
Do it.
In Germany, a swastika is allowed to be displayed in a museum and nowhere else.
Wow.
If you died for the Confederacy as a soldier, they can put that flag on your grave. Other than that, it belongs in a museum. It does not belong.
The Confederacy was around for what, 4 years? 4 years?
But here's the thing: the swastika was an ancient Mesopotamian symbol.
Right, they stole it.
That once the symbol has been tarnished with the latest hatred, then you know what? The expiration date's over in my mind, right?
And people say to me, it's heritage, not hate. I said, no, it's a heritage of hatred, because imagine seeing it flying next to the cross burning on your lawn.
That was
Senator.
That was unfortunately Senator McConnell was the one that coined that one, and I worked for him as a Senate page for a month. Somebody was like, hey, you want to get a workover at the Senate in the South Carolina? I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. And I followed the crowd, and I ended up in there and got blessed out for saying Civil War. I got an hour-long lecture about it being the War of Northern Aggression. And I was probably, I don't know, it was 17 or 18. And I remember thinking, yeah, you're crazy. And I was.
He was serious, though.
But no, it was real serious.
Oh, yeah.
At the time, and again, you got to remember, there was like Maurice Bessinger and the guy owned the barbecue place in Columbia. Man, there were guys that were seriously still attached to segregation. Like, and this is not that long ago, right? This is somebody's grandfather that was actively and participating in blatant racism, right? And the only way to justify it was to cloak it in some kind of heritage idea, and that because otherwise it was just hatred, and they couldn't sell it if they didn't have some kind of historical reference to it, and there
were a lot of people who adopted it. I think after the civil rights movement, it's just the like the Dukes of Hazzard. You know, this is the
Ah,
good old boys who drank beer and shoot girls.
and I
It
love
could
that
take on
show.
a rebel kind of vibe.
I totally, I didn't, when I was a kid, I loved that show, and it never occurred to me about the flag. I just thought they were just good old boys.
And
you
that,
know.
I think that normalized it for a lot of folks and really took it out of the realm of what it was put up in, you know, on the state capital of South Carolina. And I've said to people, if you're a Black person going to the State House for Justice and you walk in and there's Jefferson Davis looking at you, if
Yeah, yeah.
you get justice or feel like you're going to get heard.
And your
I love what the
taxes
two of you are
paid to
doing is so great.
Your taxes paid to maintain that.
So,
I'm sorry,
What you
Pastor
two are
Terri.
doing is making a way, because so many people say to me in my congregations or even among my colleagues or other people, they say, I don't know how to change things. I don't know how to do it. And I'll say, do you know any Black folks? Well, not really. I said, well, get to know some. But being vulnerable with each other and saying, yeah, you know, we love each other. We don't necessarily understand each other's lives fully. And we probably never will, because I cannot walk in anybody else's shoes. I love somebody to death and not know what they're going through. Because
and there's a little backlash about, oh, now you're going to show up, you know, and then, you know, you're going to have to take a little bit of that. I've had to kind of go, okay, yeah. I mean, I could try to like say, well, I've been actively involved in this issue for a long time, but how much really? You know what I mean? Like, so I can, you know, there are a lot of people that I'm having to say, you know, look, if somebody calls you out for just showing up now, you're just going to have to take a little bit of that.
yeah,
that's just a fact.
And it's nothing compared to what other people have taken for 400 years in this nation. So, yeah, I get called a wannabe, and my favorite is Reverend Not Quite White, because I get that, you know.
Not quite white.
Reverend Not Quite White.
I like that. Not quite
That
white.
man, that would be like I'd be super proud of that one.
Edwin,
And I put in the article that
flag. Edwin,
when I was the chaplain at Gallaudet, I did a Black History Month service, and I asked the other chaplains, you know, what are we going to do? And they said, we don't have any Black students who come to this. There were Black deaf people at Gallaudet. There was not a Black chaplain. And then I said, well, let's have this service. And we had a service, and we had like 60 people show up, which was unheard of. And James Weldon Johnson, God's Trombones is one of my favorite pieces of writing, and he's got the creation. I had somebody interpret into American Sign Language, and we had this party and all this stuff. And after that, the white people called me the Black chaplain. It's like, seriously, I'm not Black. I'm not trying to be Black or pretending to be Black, but seriously, we got to do things differently. And if I'm going to take heat for it, I don't really give a rat's patootie anymore, because I'm just tired of putting up with nonsense. I put up with this my whole life. I'm going to leave a different world for the people who come behind me, one way or the other.
And to that end, I mean, don't you feel like, I mean, and I understand the trend line hasn't improved enough, but it's improved since, you know, Mr. Morgan had to leave town in the middle of the night with a burning cross in his yard. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's been, I was telling Chrissy, I was like, I realize I'm planting a flag in this moment, and we are actively engaged in trying to help with the solution here. But it's not dangerous. Mm-hmm. You know, in 1963, it was dangerous to be involved, right? I mean,
it had to be, but to say that it's not dangerous, I'm gonna take you back a conversation 2 weeks ago, bro, where you had something happen at your house and you were wondering whether it had something to do with these shows that we're doing, and that was
but he didn't.
You still don't have evidence that it did.
But he didn't stop. I just picked up my trash cans and put them back where they were. I mean, that's
but what you're doing is important, because you're putting a human face on the fear and the anxiety and the brokenness, and you're living a different reality, and you're using your celebrity, which is, you know, I know, but if you were just Ed who worked at the gas station, I don't know how many people would be tuning in to see it like this. And
I don't know, man.
Well, they'll sure enough be listening to his music, Because it's definitely playing at the gas station.
Yeah, it's playing at Home Depot too. I promise you. So,
but
right.
no, what you're doing is
he's gonna get.
I'm the Holy Spirit in Home Depot and somewhere in the Manila in the Philippines. I promise you that. That's right. And,
I really applaud what you're doing, because what you're doing is what has to happen. This can't happen. You cannot legislate people doing the right thing. I mean,
no.
in the law, I'm not saying that. And the way the disparity in law enforcement, that was another thing. That was one of the things that happened to me. I used to write curriculum for the United Methodist Church, and I wrote a piece, and I got hate mail for it. It was on the kids who were murdered in Kalamazoo, Michigan, or two kids who were missing in Kalamazoo. One was white, and everybody went out and looked for him, and one was black, and they just assumed and labeled her a runaway. There, she had been sexually assaulted and set on fire, and the police chief, who was white in Kalamazoo, Michigan, said, we've got to address the disparity in the treatment of people of color in law enforcement. And I got hate mail writing about that. Hate mail from Methodist people.
Wait a minute, and they were mad because you were asking for fairness?
Blue lives matter. Blue lives matter. You know, all lives matter. Everybody wants to say everything, and all lives should matter. It should go without saying, but it's not true. Somebody posted on Facebook today a video of people with a Confederate flag saying, I will teach my grandchildren to hate you. There. That's today. So while things are changing, I think we're at a tipping point now in the nation. I really do. I think we are. I went to a Black Lives Matter rally in good old Cockeysville, Maryland, here in Baltimore County.
Which was unheard of at a certain time in our history. That would have been unheard of in that town.
And I was touched by the number of people of all colors out there with little bitty children teaching their children that hatred is wrong.
Yeah, kids don't know anything. They don't know any of that.
No. No. I remember this friend of mine, was he was in preschool at the time, and we were at their house talking. They're black, and she was saying, people are so crazy and da 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 da. And I mean, that's how you talk when you got friends that you've crossed the line with, where you really deal with each other. And he heard her say that to me, you white people, and he just kept going, Reverend Terry, Reverend Terry, Reverend Terry, Reverend Terry, Reverend Terry, Reverend Terry. And she was like, blah, 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 blah. She's just like that. I love this woman. What are you talking about? What do you want? And he said, Reverend Terry, you ain't white, you beige. Because he had his colors in preschool. And he said, I'm not black, I am brown, and you are beige. And I thought, we just laughed so hard. And I thought, there's not a lot of difference between brown and beige. But now he's probably in his 30s, and I'm thinking he's probably learned there's a real big difference between black and white.
So my son has a friend, and he's a ginger kid. He's like super red hair and super pasty white, and my son is one of the brown kids, and especially in the summertime, even
he
more.
Looks like me.
Anyway, so when they're little,
there seems to be a theme that goes into these conversations.
When they were playing together when they were little, they used to call each other pizza and chocolate. And it was funny because they were like, should we stop them from saying that? I was like, no, that's hilarious. Are you kidding me?
Right,
Pizza,
right.
Hey, pizza, hey, chocolate. It was like,
one of my parishioners was a second grade teacher, and this was a mostly white school, and there was a black kid who was moving in partway through the year, which is just so horrible anyway for any kid to start the school year new in the middle. And they had meetings with the social worker and the teacher and the guidance counselor. And they're like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And they were all ready for whatever happened. And sat him down next to this little white kid who looks at it and immediately says, you're black. And she's like, oh my God, it started already. And he, yes, I am. He said, Michael Jordan's black. I wish I were black too. And she said, that absolutely showed her children are not like this. We teach it to them. We teach them and ingrain it in them. Nobody's born hating anybody. Nobody is born hating anybody because of whatever makes them different.
My mom used to tell this story about me when I was 7. I was listening to an Earth, Wind and Fire record. It was 1977, and it was my favorite band on earth, right? And at some point, she came home, and I was crying. I was listening to Earth, Wind and Fire. She said, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, I can never be an Earth, Wind, and Fire because I'm that black. I mean, I was like, it had occurred to me, like all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, they're not going to let me in this band. But you know, the truth of the matter is, if I was good enough, they absolutely would have let me in that band.
Sure.
Right? And Maurice White, and this is what I say all the time to my son, like, look at what this band did, and look at what this man said, and look at the love and acceptance that he spread around the world that still exists to this day. And I think when Maurice White died, they did not give him the proper respect for the amount of peace and love that he preached through music and joined people together. And it's still going on. It's still happening because of that music. Because my son listens to some stuff right now, and I'm like, what is that glorifying? What is that saying? Like, what are you saying? That music is nothing, you know? That music is the...
You're that old guy now.
Oh, I hate it. Can't stand it. It's
well,
like,
listen,
I was like, man, what is this guy singing about? What is he talking about? He's talking about nothing good. Nothing good's coming out of that.
Well, then you're going to show us how to do it. Grab that guitar of yours. I'm going to say, Pastor Terri, we love having you on. We would love to invite you back again. Thank you for bringing such an open, wonderful perspective to what Edwin and I are trying to do.
I appreciate what you do so much, and you're making a difference in the world. Don't ever let anybody discount the difference you make just by being honest and loving each other. That's what this is about.
Do I have to love Kelly? Can I just like him?
You could tell that to my melanin challenged brother, because I didn't want to hold you up, Pastor Terri, because I could hear your dog barking, and you know, I would go over there and check on it for you.
But
you know,
you're scared of my dog.
Yes. People ask me about my athleticism and do I run, and I said there's only 3 times you'll ever see me running, ever. If I'm running from the police, if I'm running from a dog, or if I'm running north with Harriet Tubman to freedom.
I saw that coming a mile away, man.
I have
Thank
to get
you
one
all
of those
for inviting me.
Edwin only gives me enough room to get one of those racial jokes in the show. I wanted to call this Edwin McCain and his black friend.
All right, that's the last time you get to use that joke too.
All right, but Pastor Terri, thank you so much for being part of things. We love you so much. We'd love to have you back. And I'm going to throw it off to my ladies and gentlemen. You've been listening to Conversations with Edwin McCain and Kelly Bell and our guest, Pastor Terri. And I'm going to throw it to, I joke him really hard, but I'm not just his friend, but I'm a fan. Ladies and gentlemen, my very good friend, my brother of 25 plus years, Mr. Edwin McCain.
Mother, there's too many of you cry. Oh, brother, 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 there's far too many of you die. We got to find a way to bring some loving here today. Father, Father, there's no need to escalate. Oh, war is not the answer. Only love can conquer hate. And we got to find a way to bring some love in here today. Picket lines, picket signs, don't punish me with brutality. Just talk to me so we can see what's going on.
What's going on?
Going on.
What's going on?
What's going on?
What's going on?
Going on.
Ladies and gentlemen, Pastor Terri, you've been watching Conversations with Edwin McCain and Kelly Bell. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, and we will see you. Pastor, we always end with this. Peace to you.